Welcome to the channel. Here, we share stories where emotions run deep, choices have consequences, and the truth always comes to light. Settle in. You're about to hear a story you won't forget.
I was sitting in my office, going through the latest reports, when my phone buzzed. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. That was odd. He usually texted first. I answered, and the moment he spoke, I knew something was wrong. His voice was hesitant, like he was unsure of himself. "Ethan, hey." I was already leaning back in my chair, a grimace forming on my face. "What's going on?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Kevin exhaled deeply. "It's Sarah. She's at a club. And you're not gonna like this." My stomach dropped. "A club? What the hell is she doing there?" He hesitated. "Dancing." I almost laughed. "Dancing?" But then his voice dropped lower, more serious. "More like public sex, bro. She's all over some guy, and he's grabbing her everywhere, out in the open. And Paul's cheering them on." For a moment, everything inside me went still. "Paul," I repeated, trying to process. "Yeah, Linda too. A few of our other friends are watching like it's some kind of show. I didn't want to call, but I figured you'd want to know." I stared blankly at my desk. My pulse pounded in my ears. This had to be a mistake. Sarah wouldn't. "I'm sending you the address. The Crystal Room." A notification popped up on my screen. Location received. I was already grabbing my jacket, not even realizing what I was doing. "I'm on my way." The drive to the Crystal Room was a blur. I couldn't remember the traffic lights, the turns, not even how fast I was going. My thoughts were racing with Kevin's words. Paul's name echoed in my head again and again. He was supposed to be my friend. Our friend. I pulled up to the club. Neon lights reflected off the windshield. The music inside was pounding. The bass was so strong I could feel it in my chest. When I walked in, Kevin was already waiting. His face was serious. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward the dance floor. And that's when I saw her. Sarah. Her back pressed against Zach. Yeah, that Zach. The ex who dumped her back in college before she met me. His hands were on her waist, sliding lower. Their bodies moved together like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Then she turned, and I saw it. Their lips met. His hand wrapped around her neck. She didn't pull away. Around them, Paul and Linda laughed, clapping like they were watching a performance. And something inside me snapped. I didn't even realize I was moving until I was right in front of them. Sarah turned to me, slowly, almost lazily, like she had all the time in the world. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but it vanished just as fast. Instead of guilt, she smiled. "Ethan!" I raised my hand, cutting her off before she could spit out some pathetic excuse she probably rehearsed. My voice was calm, too calm. "No, you don't get to apologize, so don't bother. I'll give you time to regret this." Her smile faltered on her lips, but I wasn't done. I shifted my gaze to Paul and Linda. Just moments ago, they were laughing, egging her on like it was some kind of twisted entertainment. Now their smiles had vanished. I took a step toward them. My voice stayed steady. "I saw you clapping, like it was some circus act, while that guy kissed my soon-to-be ex-wife. From this moment on, you're both dead to me, so you better watch yourselves." Paul's grin disappeared entirely. Linda looked away, ashamed. Good. They should feel uncomfortable. I turned back to Sarah. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. She lowered her head, her fingers brushing the belt on her dress. For a moment she almost looked embarrassed. Then, quietly, she answered, 3 months, since he came back. I exhaled slowly, my jaw clenched. 3 months. 3 months of her coming home, lying in our bed, pretending everything was fine, knowing full well what was going on behind my back. Then she lifted her chin and met my eyes. Her expression hardened. "I was going to tell you. I want a divorce." I let out a bitter laugh and shook my head. "Don't bother. You'll get exactly what you deserve, Sarah. I promise you that." Her lips parted slightly, but I wasn't finished. I stepped closer. My voice dropped low. "But listen to me carefully. You're not stepping foot into my house again. Not to get your stuff, not to talk, not for anything. If you do, there will be consequences." Something shifted beside her. I turned as Zach took a step forward. His posture stiffened, shoulders squared, trying to look tough. But I saw the hesitation in his stance. "Are you threatening her?" he asked. His voice was firm, but uncertain. I stared at him, stepping into his space. Our eyes locked. "Yes, I'm threatening her. I'm telling her not to come near my house, because if she does, I'll exercise my right to stand my ground." Zach's expression changed for a brief second, then tensed. He realized I wasn't bluffing. He wasn't stupid enough to push further. The music in the club seemed to fade into the background. Silence stretched between us. I let my words settle, then turned and walked away. No glance at Sarah, Paul, or any of the so-called friends who just witnessed everything. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning in my blood. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once before a deep voice answered. "Greg Lomax speaking?" I took a steady breath, gripping the steering wheel as I got in my car. "Greg, it's Ethan. I need your help. My wife, Sarah, wants a divorce, and I want to make sure she regrets ever asking for one." A low chuckle came through the receiver. "Well, well, you called the right guy." He wasn't wrong. There was no one in town more ruthless than Greg. Greg listened quietly as I laid out the details. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he gave a low laugh. "You've thought this through. I like that." I leaned back in my seat, fingers tightening on the wheel. "The house is mine. Bought it before the marriage. She can't touch it. The business, my father's. On paper, I'm just an employee. She can't reach that either." Greg grunted in approval. "Smart. That leaves the joint accounts." "Already handled," I said, with a grin. "I emptied them this morning before heading home." "You know she's going to fight for alimony, right?" "Let her. I'll give her exactly what the court orders, not a penny more, and not a second before." Greg laughed again, this time a little louder. "Damn, Ethan, you're colder than I remember." I didn't respond. I was done playing nice. When I hung up, I drove home. The house felt different. Not like a battlefield anymore, more like something I'd reclaimed. I stood at the door for a moment, then pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Jake answered on the second ring. "Well, if it isn't the devil himself," he said with a laugh. I smirked. "I've got a job for you and the guys. Can you be here in 30? He paused for just a beat before chuckling. "Sounds fun. We're on our way." Exactly 39 minutes later, Jake pulled up with his crew. Solid guys. Veterans like me. Men who understood loyalty, respect, and most importantly, revenge. Jake got out first, cracking his knuckles. "So, what's the mission?" I pointed at the house. Everything that belongs to Sarah. Pack it, throw it outside, and make sure it disappears. But do it with a special touch. Zeke, the fastest thinker of the group, grinned. You want us to leave a message, huh? I nodded. Every piece of clothing. Before you fold it, I want to see your boot prints on it. Jake burst out laughing. Brutal. I like it. They got to work immediately.
The house filled with the sounds of opening closets, drawers slamming shut, and heavy boots stomping over fabric. The satisfaction I felt watching them work was hard to describe. Zeke held up her wedding dress, stretching it between his fingers. Special treatment for this one? I folded my arms across my chest. Yeah, make it reek. He grinned, took a long sip from his chewing tobacco bottle, and spit directly onto the white lace. A dark stain spread across the fabric like the final touch of disgrace. Then, smirking, he unzipped his pants. Mind if I add a little extra? I watched as he made his personal contribution. His stream soaked the expensive fabric. When he finished, he balled it up and shoved it to the bottom of the pile. Perfect, I muttered with a slow smile. Let it stink. As expected, there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it would be. I took a deep breath before opening it. Victoria, Sarah's mother, stood on the porch, face full of worry. Behind her, like two stray mutts, stood Paul and Linda. I didn't let them take a single step forward. Instead, I pointed to the boxes stacked on the porch, already dirtied by the street. Pick those up, I said flatly. If you don't want them left for the garbage truck, take them for your friend. Paul opened his mouth to say something, but I stared him down. He thought better of it. Linda grabbed his arm and they turned wordlessly, carrying the boxes away. I stepped aside and let Victoria in. She looked around, taking in the house where her daughter once lived, now stripped of every trace of her. Victoria sighed. Her expression was a mix of sorrow and something else. Regret, maybe. Disappointment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. Before I say anything, I want to be clear. What Sarah did was wrong. There's no excuse. No apology. I crossed my arms across my chest. Yeah? Make it reek. He grinned, took a long sip from his chewing tobacco bottle, and spit directly onto the white lace. A dark stain spread across the fabric like the final touch of disgrace. Then, smirking, he unzipped his pants. Mind if I add a little extra? I watched as he made his personal contribution. His stream soaked the expensive fabric. When he finished, he balled it up and shoved it to the bottom of the pile. Perfect, I muttered with a slow smile. Let it stink. As expected, there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it would be. I took a deep breath before opening it. Victoria, Sarah's mother, stood on the porch, face full of worry. Behind her, like two stray mutts, stood Paul and Linda. I didn't let them take a single step forward. Instead, I pointed to the boxes stacked on the porch, already dirtied by the street. Pick those up, I said flatly. If you don't want them left for the garbage truck, take them for your friend. Paul opened his mouth to say something, but I stared him down. He thought better of it. Linda grabbed his arm, and they turned wordlessly, carrying the boxes away. I stepped aside and let Victoria in. She looked around, taking in the house where her daughter once lived, now stripped of every trace of her. Victoria sighed. Her expression was a mix of sorrow and something else. Regret, maybe. Disappointment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. Before I say anything, I want to be clear. What Sarah did was wrong. There's no excuse, no apology. I crossed my arms and waited. I'm not here to defend her, she continued, wringing her hands. I just wanted to say, she loves that man. And she loves you too. There it was. The moment I should have stopped her. I laughed shortly, without a hint of humor. If she ever loved me, she wouldn't have gone back to the man who left her. Victoria flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. 5 years of marriage,
and I find out I was just a placeholder, a safe, stable choice until her old flame came knocking? Now that her old flame is back, I'm disposable." Victoria sniffled, dabbing the corner of her eye with her sleeve. "I know it hurts, Ethan, I do, but I can't make her see that." I shook my head. "I don't want her back. She made her choice. She wants a divorce? Fine. I'll make sure she gets what she truly deserves." Victoria's expression shifted slightly, something like concern flickering behind her eyes. "You're not planning to hurt her, are you?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No, I won't hurt her physically, unless she tries something. As long as she stays away from me, I'll stay away from her." Victoria exhaled in relief, but I wasn't done. "Those 5 years she spent with me," I leaned forward slightly. "She won't just pay for what she did, so will everyone who used to call me a friend." Her face went pale. She looked down, gathering herself before whispering, "That's exactly what I was afraid of." I softened a bit, reached out, and hugged her. Her frail body trembled in my arms. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "but your daughter's actions have consequences." When I pulled back, she wiped a tear from her cheek. Then, to my surprise, she gave me a small, broken smile. "I can't undo what she did, Ethan, but you'll always be like a son to me." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I gave a small nod.
Thank you. Victoria took a deep breath, straightened her back, and walked toward the door. Then she left. Victoria sat in her living room. The soft light from a lamp cast long shadows across the walls. A cup of tea sat untouched on the side table, long gone cold. She'd spent the whole evening in thought, replaying her conversation with Ethan over and over in her mind. Then the front door opened. Sarah strutted in, her heels clicking confidently across the hardwood floor. Behind her came Zach, wearing that smug grin like he'd just conquered the world. They looked every bit the carefree couple, completely unfazed by the chaos they'd caused. Victoria looked up at them, tired eyes following their movement as they entered. She let out a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "My dear daughter," she said. Her voice was heavy with disappointment. "I don't even have words for what you've done." Sarah rolled her eyes and flopped onto the couch, kicking off her shoes. "Oh, come on, Mom. He'll get over it. Ethan's always been quiet and tough. He'll pull himself together and move on." Victoria's gaze darkened. "Move on," she repeated. Her voice was quiet but sharp. Sarah smirked and leaned back, stretching her arms. "I already spoke to the attorney. We're filing next week." Zach wrapped his arm around her shoulders, grinning. "Yep, Sarah's going to get the house and half his business." Victoria didn't move. She watched them with an unreadable expression. Sarah ran her fingers through her hair, clearly pleased with herself. "Zach and I are going to live in that house. We'll make it ours." Zach nodded eagerly. "And once we get the business, we'll sell it. That'll give us enough to start over somewhere new. We've already talked about starting something, like we planned back in college." Sarah looked at Zach with a dreamy expression. "It's gonna be perfect, babe." Victoria watched them in silence for a long moment. Then, suddenly, she laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy or amusement. It was cold. So cold it made Zach's grin falter for just a moment. Victoria slowly shook her head and looked them both in the eye. "The best laid plans of mice and men," she began. Her voice was slow, deliberate. "Often go awry and leave us nothing but grief and pain.
instead of the joy we were promised. Sarah frowned. What? Victoria leaned forward just a little. Have you ever heard that poem by Robert Burns? Sarah glanced at Zach, who shrugged. No. Victoria nodded, almost knowingly. That's all right. She stood, smoothed down her dress. You'll understand it soon enough. And with that, she walked out.
Ethan sat in his car, parked a block away from Sarah's office, sipping his coffee and watching the morning unfold exactly as he had planned. The sun had barely risen, but the day was already moving according to his script. He glanced at his watch. Right on time, a man in a dark suit walked through the glass front doors of the office building and approached the receptionist's desk. Ethan knew him well. Philip, the process server he'd hired. Professional, efficient, and, when needed, theatrical. Within minutes, Ethan saw Philip step into Sarah's office. He leaned back in his seat, letting the moment build. He wasn't there to see the look on her face when she received the envelope, but he could picture it vividly. First, confusion. Then, realization. Then, panic. He could almost hear her heartbeat quicken as she read the words in the petition. Grounds for divorce. Adultery. Philip, ever polite, had likely greeted her with a smile. Are you Mrs. Sarah Dalton? She probably nodded, maybe distracted, thinking it was just routine paperwork. Then, with the same polite smile, he would have handed her the thick manila envelope. Have a nice day. Ethan smirked to himself, imagining the silence that followed in her office. People watching, whispers already spreading. A small town like theirs didn't let scandals slide under the radar. And that envelope didn't just contain divorce papers, it contained evidence. Photos taken at the club, showing Sarah and Zach locked in each other's arms, lost in their own world. Clear, undeniable. No explanations, no excuses. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, watching as she hurried into her boss's office, right on schedule. Brandon was an old friend. He'd known Sarah almost as long as Ethan had. But unlike Ethan, he'd never fallen for her charm. He'd warned Ethan once, years ago, to be careful with her. Ethan hadn't listened. You need the morning off? Brandon probably asked, smiling like he'd been waiting for this moment. She probably nodded, maybe distracted, thinking it was just routine paperwork. Then, with the same polite smile, he would have handed her the thick manila envelope. Have a nice day. Ethan nodded to himself, imagining the silence that followed in her office. People watching. Whispers already spreading. A small town like theirs didn't let scandals slide under the radar. And that envelope didn't just contain divorce papers, it contained evidence. Photos taken at the club showing Sarah and Zach locked in each other's arms, lost in their own world. Clear, undeniable. No explanations, no excuses. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, watching as she hurried into her boss's office, right on schedule. Brandon was an old friend. He'd known Sarah almost as long as Ethan had, but unlike Ethan, he'd never fallen for her charm. He'd warned Ethan once, years ago, to be careful with her. Ethan hadn't listened. You need the morning off? Brandon probably asked, smiling like he'd been waiting for this moment. She probably nodded, maybe distracted, thinking it was just routine paperwork. Then, with the same polite smile, he would have handed her the thick manila envelope. Have a nice day. Moments later, she exited the office, face pale, steps unsteady. Ethan's phone rang in his pocket. Brandon? He answered, already knowing what he'd say. It's done.
"She's heading home," Brandon said. Ethan smiled as he watched her walk toward the parking lot. "Thanks. Stick to the plan." Brandon laughed. "I got you, man." Ethan pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe, one of those cozy places with wooden booths and the smell of fresh pastries in the air. He needed something sweet to celebrate. He ordered a donut and a black coffee, then took a seat by the window, soaking in the warm hum of everyday life around him. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. People laughed, went about their business, but across town, Sarah's world was falling apart. He took a slow bite of the donut, savoring the flavor, just as his phone buzzed on the table. Sarah, right on time. He brought the phone to his ear. Before he could say a word, her voice exploded through the speaker, sharp and furious. "You son of a bitch! You're trying to destroy me!" He stirred his coffee calmly, completely unfazed. "Good morning to you, too." "Don't play games, Ethan," she shouted. "I just saw the divorce papers. No mention of the house, no mention of the business. Where's my half?" He sipped his coffee before answering, voice calm, steady. "Your half went down the drain the moment you spread your legs for a man who wasn't your husband." Silence, just for a second. Then a gasp of outrage. He leaned back in his seat, watching a couple walk by, hand in hand, laughing about something. Such a simple, beautiful thing. Loyalty. "If you need something," he added, "talk to your lover. Maybe he'll buy you that dream house you were planning to steal from me." Her breathing turned ragged. He could feel her fury through the phone. He decided to twist the knife a little more. "And before you say another word," he continued, "just remember you and your little boyfriend are now under a restraining order. Don't come near my house. Don't come near my business." He heard her suck in a sharp breath, ready to scream again. Click. He ended the call, placed the phone back on the table, took another bite of his donut. Perfect. It was still warm. The satisfaction settled over him like a soft blanket. One battle down, but the war wasn't over yet. Now it was time for Paul and Linda to feel the consequences of their betrayal.
But before we dive into that, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Ethan Dalton. I served 5 years in the U.S. Marines, did tours in Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia. After I got out, I came home to run my father's business, a modest but vital IT company. We weren't some massive corporation, but in our town, we didn't need to be. We were the backbone for every business in the county. Data management, networking, tech support. If a company used computers, they needed us. That included Paul and Linda. Paul ran a small but growing manufacturing business. Linda owned an accounting firm. Both of them laughed and drank that night in the club like my marriage was a joke. That was the night they chose a side. And now, they were going to pay for it. The irony? Their service contracts with us expired 2 weeks ago. I knew the day would come. That's why I didn't renew. I let them think everything was fine. Let them keep using our cloud services, leased equipment, and support, completely unaware their entire infrastructure was hanging by a thread. And now, that thread was about to snap. I returned to my office and opened my laptop. Leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled, staring at the dashboard that listed all active client contracts. Paul? Expired. Linda? Expired. Their companies didn't even realize that at any moment their data could be wiped and their systems shut down. No backups, no contingency plans. It was time to act. I picked up my phone and called Max, my client manager. He picked up on the second ring. "Ethan, everything all right?" "I've got a job for you," I said, my voice flat. "Send official notices to Paul and Linda. Inform them their contracts have expired. Give them 48 hours to retrieve their data. And on the third day, we wipe everything and collect all leased equipment." There was a pause. Then Max chuckled. "Damn, you're really going through with it?" "No more playing nice," I said, hearing his keyboard start clacking in the background. "Got it. Should I keep it professional or add a little spice?" I smirked. "Keep it professional, but don't offer any renewals. Make it clear. They're on their own now." "Whistle. Copy that?" They'll panic once they realize they ignored all those renewal emails. I nodded to myself. Exactly. They thought I'd auto-renew like always, like I owed them something. "Well, they're in for a nasty surprise. You think they'll come crawling back begging for a new contract?" I laughed darkly. "Oh, they will. And when they do, I'll remind them why they're in this mess. They chose the wrong side." The third day arrived, just as expected. My phone lit up with calls. The screen flashed Paul. I let it ring a few times before finally picking up, leaning back in my chair with a smile. The moment I answered, Paul's voice erupted through the speaker, frantic and panicked. "Ethan, what the hell is going on? Why did your people take our computers? Where are our laptops? I can't access anything. You can't do this. We have a contract." I held the phone away from my ear, letting him shout. I could practically picture him, red-faced, sweating, pacing his office in a full meltdown. When he finally ran out of steam, I spoke. Calm, measured. "What contract, Paul?" There was a pause. "What do you mean, what contract?" "Our agreement expired weeks ago. You didn't renew it. There is no contract." I let the words hang there for a second, then added, "And my team sent you multiple reminders. You ignored every single one. So now I'm returning the favor." Then I hung up. Not 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Linda. I sighed, already knowing how this would go. I answered. "Ethan, you're really going to do this?" she asked, voice tight with panic. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I focused on the monitor in front of me. Linda's client data, nicely organized on our system, waiting for one command. I placed my finger over the Enter key, then pressed it. I watched as the files began disappearing, row after row, folder after folder, until the screen was empty. Then I brought the phone back to my ear. "Wait, Linda," I said quietly, savoring the moment. "It's done." The scream on the other end was instant and piercing. "What did you just do? All my client data's gone. They're going to sue me." I smiled slightly. "Then explain to them how you ignored your IT provider's renewal notices and how we legally wiped your data once the contract expired." I paused for effect. "Have a nice day, Linda." Click. I ended the call. Now that Paul and Linda were out of the picture, all that remained was Sarah and her cheating toy boy Zach. But I knew I had to be patient. The divorce had to be finalized first. Sarah tried to fight the terms in court. Her lawyer made a weak attempt to paint her as the victim. She wanted the house. She wanted a share of what she called our business. She wanted everything she thought she was entitled to. But luck wasn't on her side. My lawyer? He was better. "Your Honor," he began confidently, standing tall, "we'd like to state that the house in question is not marital property. It was purchased solely by my client before the marriage and remains fully in his name." Sarah's attorney shifted in his seat. Sarah clenched her jaw. The judge nodded. "Does the plaintiff have any evidence to dispute this?" Her lawyer sighed. "No, Your Honor." Strike one. Next, they tried to argue that because I had a successful IT business, Sarah deserved half. That's where it got fun. My lawyer smoothed his suit and addressed the judge with a small smile. "Your Honor, my client does not own any business. He is an employee at his father's IT company." The judge looked at me. "Mr. Dalton, can you confirm your income?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. My income is just over $1,000 a month." Sarah's head snapped toward me. Her jaw dropped. I kept my face neutral. "My client has pay stubs from the last 12 months to confirm this," my attorney added, handing over the neatly organized documents. "As you'll see, his earnings are significantly lower than the plaintiff's. In fact, she earns more than he does." The judge glanced through the paperwork, then looked back at Sarah. "Ms. Dalton, based on this evidence, I see no grounds for awarding you any portion of his income or assets." Strike two. Then came the best part. "In addition," my lawyer continued, flipping another page, "given that my client earns substantially less, and considering the dissolution of the marriage was caused by the plaintiff's adultery, we are requesting spousal support in favor of my client." Sarah jumped out of her seat. "What?" she shouted. "This is outrageous!" The judge raised a hand to silence her. "Ms. Dalton," he said sternly, "considering that your husband was the lower-earning spouse and that the marriage ended due to your infidelity, I hereby award Mr. Dalton spousal support in the amount of $500 per month for 2 years or until he remarries, whichever comes first." Sarah turned bright red. Her fists clenched at her sides. She looked like she wanted to scream. But in that courtroom, she couldn't do a damn thing. Strike three. I could barely suppress the smile as we left the courtroom. Sarah stormed up to me, eyes blazing. "You set this all up. You manipulated everything." I shrugged. "No, Sarah, I just let the truth do its job." She gritted her teeth. "You think you won?" I laughed softly. "Oh, I know I did." And then I turned and walked away, already planning my final move. I was going to get my 2 years, and after that, I'd still be free.
3 months later, the divorce decree arrived. I was officially free. Now there was only one thing left to do. As I walked out of the courthouse, I called Brandon, Sarah's boss. He answered immediately, his voice practically smiling. "Sounds like it's finally over," he said. I smiled back. "Yeah, free at last. So tonight, drinks are on you." He laughed. "No way! I've got dinner plans with Mr. Ethan Dalton. That guy deserves a damn celebration." He laughed again, then added, "By the way, your Uncle Hellman, the judge? Smooth move." I chuckled. Small town advantage. Never give your enemies a fighting chance. Brandon lowered his voice, playful. "You know who her lawyer was, right?" "Yep, Harry." "Wait, your Uncle Harry?" I nodded. "Mom's side." I set her up. Hard. Brandon let out a whistle. Man, she never had a shot. "She's moving out tomorrow. I've already got the papers ready." As for Zach, I spoke with Mr. Patel this morning, his boss, told him everything. That man was furious when he found out one of his employees was having an affair with a married client. By this evening, Zach's getting fired. No severance, no letter of recommendation, nothing. "Damn," Brandon muttered. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." We both laughed. I thanked him and hung up. A week passed. It was a quiet Wednesday night when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find Victoria standing there, her face unreadable. "Hey, Ethan," she said softly. "Hey, Victoria. Come on in." She stepped into the living room and sat on the couch,
smoothing her skirt before looking up at me with a faint smile. I don't really know how to say this, but Sarah is falling apart. I sat across from her, leaning back in the chair. Yeah, I'm not surprised. She burned every bridge in this town. She tilted her head, her smile tinged with irony. No, Ethan, she didn't just burn bridges. She crossed the wrong one. I met her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt it. Peace. A deep exhale left my chest. I don't regret what I did. She shook her head. You shouldn't. She took you for granted. She ruined a good man and a good marriage. I nodded. She was right. Then her tone shifted. There's something else. Paul and Linda, they're under massive pressure. That caught my attention. My brow rose slightly. It's true, she confirmed. They're blaming each other. Their businesses are crashing. Clients are suing them for millions. I let out a low whistle. Millions they don't have. She gave a dry laugh. Exactly. I leaned back and crossed my arms, satisfied. They earned it. She hesitated before continuing. And Zach? I tilted my head. What about him? She sighed. He's already left town, but not before things got really ugly. I waited. There was a big fight between them, loud, violent. He even hit her. I didn't flinch. She saw that and continued. I didn't step in. I didn't say anything. I just stood there and watched. Her voice was quiet. The only thing I kept thinking was how tragic it was that the man who once pampered her and loved her was now gone, and the one she chose instead, he treated her like garbage. I breathed slowly. Those were her choices, these were her consequences. Victoria studied me, then stood. I should get going. It's late. I stood as well. Good night, Victoria. She gave me one final look, a mix of sorrow and acceptance. Goodbye, Ethan. And with that, she walked out the door.
Life has a funny way of restoring balance. After everything that happened, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. There was no weight pulling me down, no toxic people draining my energy. My house was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was peaceful. And finally, I had the time to focus on what I wanted. One of those things? Getting dogs. I'd always wanted them. But Sarah hated the idea. Too messy, too loud, too much work. Well, Sarah wasn't around anymore. So I went to a breeder in a nearby town and came home with 2 German Shepherd puppies, a brother and sister. I named them Titan and Luna. Titan was bold, protective, always ready to charge into action. Luna was smart, observant, always thinking before she moved. They became my shadows, following me everywhere, sleeping by my bed, always keeping me company. With them, my morning runs became enjoyable again. The house felt alive. And my mood? Let's just say, they made me smile more than I had in years. Then came Emily. I met her at the dog park. Well, Titan and Luna met her first. She was sitting on a bench, sipping coffee, while her own German Shepherd, Rex, was wrestling with a stick twice his size. My 2 ran straight to him, and before I could call them back, they were all locked in a tug-of-war. Emily laughed, shaking her head. Looks like we've got a team forming over here. I smiled. Yeah, seems like it. Sorry if they're bothering him. She waved a hand. Are you kidding? That's the most fun he's had all week. We started talking. 1 hour turned into 2. Then came text messages. Then coffee meetups. Emily was warm, easy to talk to, smart, funny, confident.
She wasn't like anyone I'd dealt with before. There were no games, no manipulation, just honest conversation and real smiles. Meeting her wasn't like a lightning bolt. It was quieter, gentler. Like finding a missing piece I hadn't even known was gone. Before long, Emily and Rex were part of my life. We went hiking with the dogs, spent lazy Sundays watching movies, cooked dinner together while 3 shepherds hovered around the kitchen waiting for scraps. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was just right. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat on my porch. She leaned against me, sipping wine. Titan, Luna, and Rex snoozed at our feet. Emily looked up at me and smiled softly. "You look happy." I thought about that for a moment, and for the first time in a long, long while, I realized it was true. I smiled back. "Yeah, I really am."
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share with a friend, and subscribe for more.